To fully and clearly comprehend the whole of this music, we need to step back a bit from it and focus our attention on human consciousness, to get inside the composer's mind. This is the most important question to answer in order to understand the message behind and the material content of this musical work. Consciousness, human consciousness, the conscious perception of time, of place or country, and of people, of human interaction and perception. Today's perception of and compassion for people whose DNA have made them dwarfs or witch folks of the middle 19th century termed gnomes. Unfortunately, there exist many false preconceptions of dwarfs according to such vernacular as Disney cinema, cartoons, fairy tales, as well as many other mass media-based misrepresentation which constitute our understanding of the 19th century portrayal of gnomes, or at least the essence of European thought at that time. Our modern comprehension of dwarfs originally derived from the primitive views of early European culture. Today, fairy tales culture portrays dwarfs of cute, fanciful, agile, and heroic characters in caps, sometimes as figurines with pom-poms, who engender positive emotions. But 19th century dwarfs are often portrayed as little people with supernatural abilities. They freely go through walls, cliffs, granite, or material barriers. They live underground, and later I will explain why these concepts are so important to our narrative. The overly simplistic description of their nature is caricature rooted to traditional satire. They are self-conscious, seemingly arrogant, and overly serious, focused on the goal of possessing certain objects, lacking in humor or grumpy. This makes them objects of ridicule when they are placed among people of normal stature. There is Dwarfs of 19th century is a parody, a cartoon version of a person. Above all, they're short, presumably to facilitate their walking inside underground caves. And, in addition, they possess superhuman abilities. Since Mussorgsky was extremely adept at creating parodies and musical cartoons, according to the memories of the contemporaries, whenever he spontaneously improvised on all sorts of satirical and humorous themes, he made people laugh out loud. So much so that Mussorgsky's piano creations caused the public to fall down from laughing. But the thing that is the most interesting is the true artist Mussorgsky did not just perform the parodies, he actually became their reincarnation. It was his secret, his brilliance, his public influence. Because of this, we are taking one step deeper towards the undertaking of this distinctive musical miniature. Mussorgsky doesn't just play at the piano, he transforms himself. How we no longer see Modest Petrovich in front of us, instead we see the troll, Nibelunga, Gnome, Zwerg, anyone with all its grimaces. Of course, when we have to do this, we should not overplay like bad actors, but they are said to be overacting. But when we ignore those things, which accent the presence of the actor in the author's personality, it's not good. So the dwarf, as I have been describing, it is based on knowledge of European mythology, and the image of the story came to Russia. There is a perfect grounding for the humor, satire, and surreal talent of Mussorgsky. Это уже идеальная почва для юмористического, сатирического и сюрреалистического таланта, которым обладал Mussorgsky. In this play, Mussorgsky let his fantasy run wild in an ironic, sarcastic, and humorous way. And now I want to go straight to the text, so together we'll look to complete caricature and sharp our contrast with the defiant of appearance of the gnome. The dwarf appears suddenly, startling us. The dwarves often do this, jumping out from the underground. Then we have a reaction. He looks around, or we're looking at him. For sure, it's simply jumps, grimaces, and so on. A very characteristic beginning, which can be attributed to the image of any gnome from any European country's mythology. Well, Now we move on to the point where the image of the gnome transforms and experience amazing changes grounded in Russian soil. Let's see how all this information collected from the middle of the 19th century could be superimposed of the consciousness of the great poet, satirist, and surrealist Mussorgsky. Thinking about death, they said, in fact, his fixation, memento mori, always was present about the otherworldly inferno, which was quite fashionable at the time. The parallel is obvious. Without thinking, all this mythology, once filtered through the Russian consciousness, leads us instinctively to the parallel, even if I don't explicitly articulate it. I think you already guessed it. Otherworldly characters, underground people, caves, underground worlds, surreal beings. Who could it be? In the Russian mind, it's Gogol. Gogol, and one more Gogol, the greatest surrealist of Russian literature. Now we have arrived at the proper place and time for our journey. The time and place in terms of the consciousness of the peoples, nationalities, countries, and the individual. In the Russian consciousness of a man with both Mussorgsky's mind and immense talent, all mythology would be about dwarfs filtered through the prism of Gogol's consciousness, the consciousness of Russian Goya, with all its world of horror. Now we have the direct path I mentioned in my lectures many times. There are Russian artists of the surrealist school, Gogol, Mussorgsky, in part Dostoevsky, Bulgakov, Shostakovich, Yerofeev in literature. Who we choose to include in this list depends on our personal taste. Leskov and Sologub can be included here too. In short, this surrealistic Russian direction is musical, literary, and poetic. There are certainly surrealist psychologists with a strong orientation towards diabolical satire, quite talented in cosmic satire and irony realized through surrealistic and mystical imagery. Once you understand how Gogol had become established as an intrinsic part of Russian philosophical thought, this list of artists becomes obvious choice and obvious direction. Unusual, unique. This neither fully reflects Goya, nor Europe, nor all the surrealistic dwarfs and horrors I have enumerated, whether they be comic or satirical. It's already pure Russian, once rooted in European soil. Interestingly, it's now Russian. A total transformation on the Russian native soil. Therefore, when we get to material that follows, this is obviously music of satire or mockery, which the image of seemingly no longer that of European dwarf, but it is now replaced by all manners of freaks and mental ugliness from Gogol's writings. Imps, Russian imps, a comprehensive picture of the folk-tale dwarf in spirit, thought, and physical dimension.
Душевные уроды, душевные калеки, карлики, русские карлики. Всеобъемлющий образ карлика, карлика духовного, карлика физического.
Moving on the next bars, by 1868, Mussorgsky had already met Gogol. It became obvious by this time that his artistry had been infused and injected in a positive way by Gogol's creative force. He had already written a significant part of the opera based on the plot of Gogol's marriage story.
Он написал же значительную часть оперы на сюжет женитьбы Гоголя.
By 1868, it had already been performed. That means 5 years before Pictures was composed, he was already completely immersed in Gogol's world. He was quite ahead of his time, so when he was playing and prepared scenes from the opera, whether in small living room groups or in full public view, nobody understood the seriousness of his subject, finding it easier to view in a matter of curiosity and frivolity. And let's delve further into the text and have a closer look to the music. We here already knows Sabakevich and other characters of the Gogol satire. All the characters are here. It is a rock touch. This presents us a vivid image of Modest Petrovich. It's impossible for him not to be seen here. Because of this, there is no way it can be played using classical technique. It would be ridiculous to falsely choose an aesthetic that fails to recognize the omnipresent spirit of the composer in this music. Mussorgsky is present in every pianistic motion made by the body.
А здесь Mussorgsky присутствует вот в каждом броске тела и рук.
Especially here. Well, who else can slap on the keyboard with the whole power? Only Modest Petrovich, of course. Nobody else. No European would allow himself to do this. No German school would only attack nimbly. It's necessary, of course, to maintain the text away. That is true to the intent of Modest Petrovich. I think here is the tune. We can surely catch the famous intonation from the flea. It's sarcasm, pure Mussorgsky sarcasm.
Подписной сарказм Mussorgsky.
Flea. Once more flea.
На этом заканчивается внешнее построение образа гнома.
Here concludes the formation of image of Gnome. But further, there is a beginning. Who is the Gogol most terrifying dwarf towards what is our Russian consciousness going? V and only V. Can be no one else. Raise my eyelids. This is narrative comes directly from the scary Russian dwarf
Ничего
itself.
другого быть не может. Поднимите мне веки. Здесь уже идет совершенно очевидное повествование русского страшного Карлы.
All the time.
Совершенно
We see him. He's just moving toward us. I think that no one will doubt who we see before us. Obviously, the satanic and terrifying we. V. Moving towards us, moving on us, killing everything. Now our fantasy is taking us to the next step. It is an infernal, entirely incredibly conveyed by simple but very effective thrills and chromatic glissandos. By the way, nobody had done it like before. Nor has anyone done it like this in modern times. Here we're moving straight to Shostakovich, who really appreciated Mussorgsky, because he is one of the few who understood his depths. In all this metaphysics, Mussorgsky and Shostakovich are like relatives of each other. So let's go further. have a phenomenal picture that is phenomenally short. It's real Inferno, yes, the very one, which is in fact was very fashionable, adopted by the intelligentsia of those days, which Dostoevsky very often used, Inferno, infernal. So we're having consummation by this inferno's fire, and the corpse become a chilling eyes of death. Concluding with a diabolic and infernal passion. He returns to the underground in the same way he appeared. In the last line, where he spirals into the soil. And Mussorgsky asks us to play every note with extreme force. So the thing falls through the earth. It is absolutely fantastic. It's all the European world's manifestation of Mephistopheles are fading away, all of them. All Infernos pale, really pale compared to this Russian Inferno, because they are unable to do this so effectively, convey the force of devil to us. Even Liszt could not, in spite of his beautiful knowledge of harmonies, symphonic structure, and his endless technical wizardry, even with all this, put it together. Here Mussorgsky's talent, through a whole series of philosophers and writers whom I enumerated, closes in on Shostakovich and partly on Yerofeev too, who is an icy horror, created his own visions of Russian passions, nothing like that exists anywhere in musical literature, nor in the concepts of written literature. There is nothing like this in the world. Because it gives from earth. It gives just from the center of earth, without any school, so-called school, without any influence of which could interfere among these earthy feelings of horror. So, here we're having truly infernal picture where we really need to present both the satire and the humor embodied by Mussorgsky sitting at the piano and delve deep into the surreal pathology, psyche, and the sacred mentality of Russian people, which is music has yet to be spoken of. This is the legacy of Mussorgsky, which we must understand to fully comprehend the man and appreciate his music. It will probably be 200 years before we begin to understand the amazing psychology of this completely crazy genius, just as only now are people beginning to understand that's of best of Dostoevsky, the most psychological, infernal pages of Dostoevsky, with all these prophetic foundings, which we're finding only now, almost 200 years after. Next, Mussorgsky is coming to his senses. Now we can once again see our charming Modest Petrovich, who is returning back to his body, his soul, his normal self. As he said each time the theme prominent appears, is a physiognomy of Modest Petrovich himself as a narrator, his autoportrait. He comes to us in his body again. He appears in between the most dramatic points, in some ways moderating the drama and preparing us for the next piece, next picture, which is nothing more than his reincarnation, his mental state, and absolutely fantastic psychological dives into the hidden places of the psyche of the Russian man. So, presented with this horror, how does Modest Petrovich react? He writes,
Итак, как реагирует после этого ужаса, который представился ему Modest Petrovich? Он пишет.
Moderato commodo assai e con delicatezza. That means very discreet, discreetly quiet, and delicate. And he is drawing his inner self. Well, see what he does next. Just look at this, listen to it. Completely incredible reaction. It is delicate, floating Modest Petrovich, obviously smiling and floating in space.
Modest Petrovich, плывущий в пространстве, совершенно явно улыбающийся.
These three chords can represent nothing else but a bright smile.
Как светлая улыбка.
With some coquetry, there is nothing missing. Everything is included. Everything that goes with genius. All encompassing. So, what is it all about? Something that appeals to our modern sensibilities as people. Suspended in air, smiling. What is the modern jargon for it? How it can be indicated? Swing. Yes, Russian swing of the second part of the 19th century sounds wild, doesn't it? Weird, when viewed from the purely historical perspective. But and this is precisely what makes Modest Petrovich seem so modern, so appealing to us as listeners. It will be always something new. It's already part of Earth's atmosphere, the atmosphere of our life. It's forever. Nowadays it's called swing, but in Mussorgsky time it was called enlightenment, floating and soaring. Nowadays swing, probably 1,000 years it will be called something else, more appropriate to the future times, but it will always embody that which appeals to the pleasantries of the human condition. By the way, this piece has that quality which makes it so appealing to jazz performers. They go crazy for it. They don't interpret it the way the classical musicians do, but through its soul, the music communicates something elemental to the human condition, that is, this wise cerebral. They can feel this swing intuitively. because of their formal just training. Just performers quickly understand it, because they feel it's in their gut. For sure, it's so basic that feeling its essence demands no lengthy evaluation of analysis. Although, to understand it the way that Russian understand it, you need to be Russian to inhabit the Russian soul. In fact, you may even only fully understand it in the way we are referring to the notion of understanding here if you are a Russian psychologist, writer, or historian. But the feelings engendered here at the intuitive to everyone, it makes take some time for classical musicians to fully understand. And the gut level, all their practitioners of the pop and jazz idioms have to offer Mussorgsky and vice versa. Shame, shame, and more shame on those classically trained musicians that ignore that side of Mussorgsky. This works in interesting pieces of dynamic time puzzle. Together they form intuitive, ingenious imagery that is timely fantastical. Descending from the world of Russian poverty, the silence of progressive, half novelist, half musicians, just plain smart, intelligent people from the streets. We have here something completely new. We inherited through a time portal something forward-looking and trending worldwide now. A few texts becoming a prognosticator of the swing movement. So like that, floating in space, showing down, softly swinging, we are moving into Italy, or into Oldcastle now, and we will see. I will see you in the next episode. Thank you very much for your attention.